The throne room of the empire was cold, not because of the temperature, but because of the woman who sat upon its crystal seat. Queen looked down at her youngest daughter with eyes that held no warmth. Her silver skin glowed under the pale lights, and her long white hair fell like a waterfall behind her shoulders. She was beautiful in the way that a blade was beautiful, sharp and dangerous. Stood before her mother with her head bowed. She was 23 years old, but in this room she felt like a child again. A child who could never do anything right. A child who was born wrong. "You will marry the human," Queen said. Her voice echoed through the empty hall. "The arrangement has been made." His heart stopped. She had expected punishment. She had expected to be sent away to some distant moon. But marriage to a human. "Mother," she whispered, "please. Do not call me that here." The queen's voice was ice. "In this room I am your queen, and you will obey." Felt tears burn behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Crying was another weakness, another thing that made her different from her sisters. Her three older sisters could move objects with their minds. They could read thoughts. They could bend light and shadow to their will. These were the gifts of the people. These were the things that made them powerful. But had nothing. She was born without any psychic ability. In a society that valued mental power above all else, she was considered broken, defective, a stain on the royal bloodline. "The human's name is," the queen continued. "He is a diplomat from Earth. They have been asking for stronger ties with our empire. I have decided to give them what they want." "By giving them me," said quietly. "By removing a problem from my court." Queen stood from her throne and walked down the steps toward her daughter. She stopped just inches away, looking down at her with cold eyes. "You have brought shame to this family for 23 years. Your sisters have won battles. They have conquered worlds. And you cannot even light a candle with your mind." Said nothing. What could she say? It was all true. "This marriage will serve two purposes," the queen said. "It will strengthen our alliance with Earth, and it will remove you from my sight forever. The humans will take you to there. You will live there. You will die there, and you will never return to space." The words hit like physical blows. She had always known her mother did not love her, but to hear it spoken so plainly, so cruelly, it was almost too much to bear. "When?" asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Tomorrow. The human arrives tonight. You will meet him at dinner. You will be polite. You will be pleasant, and you will not embarrass me." The queen turned away. "Now leave. I have real matters to attend to." Bowed low, as was expected, and walked out of the throne room on legs that felt like water. The guards at the door did not look at her. The servants in the hallway stepped aside without acknowledgement. She was invisible. She had always been invisible. That night stood in front of her mirror and tried to prepare herself. She wore a simple blue dress, nothing too fancy. Her mother had not bothered to send her anything special for the occasion. Her dark hair was pulled back from her face, and her silver skin looked pale and tired. What would the human be like? She had heard stories about humans. They were weak physically. They had no psychic powers at all. They lived short lives compared to the... Most of her people looked down on them as primitive creatures, barely worth noticing. And now she would marry one. The dinner was held in the small dining hall, not the grand one used for important guests. Another reminder of how little this marriage meant to the queen. Arrived first and sat alone at the long table, waiting. When the door opened, she looked up to see a man walk in. He was not what she expected. Was tall for a human, with broad shoulders and a kind face. His hair was dark and slightly messy, as if he had been running his fingers through it. His eyes were brown and warm, and when he saw her, he smiled. It was a real smile, not the cold, political smiles she was used to seeing in court. This was the smile of someone who was genuinely happy to meet her. "You must be," he said. His voice was deep and gentle. He walked toward her and bowed, not the formal bow of a diplomat but a respectful bow of greeting. "I am. It is an honor to meet you." did not know what to say. No one had ever called meeting her an honor before. "Please sit," she managed. Sat across from her. He studied her face with curiosity but not judgment. "I know this must be strange for you," he said. "I want you to know I did not ask for this marriage." "Neither did I," said quietly. "I know," he nodded. "But I also want you to know that I will not treat you badly. I am not here to own you or control you. I am here because our people need an alliance and I was chosen to represent Earth. But that does not mean we cannot find respect for each other, maybe even friendship." Stared at him. In all her years at court, no one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever offered her respect or friendship. "You know what I am," she said. "You know why they chose me for this marriage. I know what they say about you." Eyes were steady. "They say you have no powers. They say you are weak. They say you are worthless." He paused. "But I have learned something in my years as a diplomat. The things people say are often not the truth. They are just stories that powerful people tell to make themselves feel better." Felt something stir inside her chest. It was a small feeling almost forgotten. Hope. "I do not know you yet," continued. "But I would like to. Not the person your mother says you are. The real you. The person you are when no one is watching. The person you could become if someone gave you the chance." The door opened again and servants began to bring in food. The moment was broken, but something had changed. For the first time in her life, felt like someone was actually seeing her. The next morning she stood at the landing dock with a small bag of belongings. Her mother had not come to say goodbye. Her sisters had not come either. Only a few servants stood at a distance, watching without emotion. Was waiting by his ship. When he saw her, he walked forward and took her bag gently from her hands. "Ready?" he asked. Looked back at the palace one last time. The cold towers, the empty windows, the home that had never been a home. "Yes," she said, "I am ready." As the ship lifted off and the planet grew smaller below them, felt the weight of her old life falling away. She did not know what waited for her on Earth. She did not know if kindness was real or just an act. But for the first time in 23 years, she was free. And somewhere deep inside her, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, she was not as weak as everyone believed. The journey to Earth took 3 weeks. During that time, learned more about humans than she had in her entire life on. She learned that they laughed loudly and often. She learned that they ate strange foods and told stranger jokes. She learned that they touched each other, pats on the shoulder, hugs, handshakes, as if physical contact was the most natural thing in the world. But most importantly, she learned about. He was patient with her. When she did not understand something, he explained it without making her feel stupid. When she was quiet, he did not push her to talk. When she cried, and she did cry late at night when she thought no one could hear, he pretended not to notice the next morning. One evening, they sat together in the ship's observation deck, watching the stars drift by. "Can I ask you something?" said. "Of course." "Why are you being so kind to me? You know what I am. You know I have no value." Turned to look at her. His expression was serious. "No value? Who told you that?" "Everyone, my mother, my sisters, the entire court. I was born without gifts. In society, that makes me worthless." "And what do you think?" The question surprised her. No one had ever asked what she thought about herself. I do not know," she admitted. "I have never been allowed to think about it." Nodded slowly. "On Earth we have a saying. A fish does not know it can climb trees until someone tells it to try. Your people judge worth by one thing, psychic power. But there are many kinds of strength, many kinds of value. Your people just never bothered to look for them in you." "What kinds of strength could I possibly have?" "I have been watching you for 3 weeks," said. "Do you want to know what I see?" Nodded, her heart beating fast. "I see someone who has been hurt every day of her life but still gets up each morning. I see someone who has been told she is nothing but still tries to be something. I see someone with more courage than all her psychic sisters combined. They have never had to fight for anything. You have had to fight for everything. Felt tears well up in her eyes. That is not strength, that is just surviving. Surviving is strength, said firmly. Never let anyone tell you otherwise. They arrived on Earth on a bright spring morning, had never seen so much green. There was all crystal and metal, cold and perfect. But Earth was alive. Trees swayed in the wind. Birds sang in the sky. Flowers bloomed in colors she had never seen before. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "It is home," said, "and now it is your home too." Their house was modest by royal standards, but too, it was wonderful. It had large windows that let in sunlight. It had a garden where she could walk barefoot in the grass. It had a kitchen where cooked meals with his own hands, something that would have shocked the court. In those first months, taught her many things. He taught her to cook simple dishes. At first, she burned everything. She cut her fingers and dropped pans and made a mess of the kitchen, but just laughed and helped her clean up and encouraged her to try again. "We have servants for this," she said one day, frustrated after her third failed attempt at making rice. "On Earth, we learn to take care of ourselves," replied. "There is pride in that. There is freedom in not needing others to do everything for you." She thought about that for a long time. He taught her to read human books. She discovered stories about heroes who had no special powers, just determination and cleverness and heart. She read about people who changed the world not with strength, but with ideas. She read about love and loss and hope, and she felt her own heart begin to open. He taught her to exercise, not the gentle, dignified movements of nobles, but real physical training, running, lifting, fighting. At first, her body ached and she wanted to quit, but ran beside her, lifted beside her, fought beside her. "Why do humans do this?" she asked one day, gasping for breath after a long run. "Your bodies are weaker than ours. Why do you push them so hard?" "Because our bodies are all we have," said. "We have no psychic powers, no advanced technology built into our DNA. We have to work with what we were given. And when you work hard at something, you grow. That is the human way. We are not born strong. We become strong." Those words changed something inside. All her life, she had believed that worth was something you were born with. You either had gifts or you did not. But humans believed something different. They believed that worth was something you created through effort and choice and will. Maybe they were right. 1 year passed, then 2, then 3. Grew stronger, not just physically but mentally and emotionally. She learned to speak her mind. She learned to stand tall. She learned that she had value, not because of what she could do with her mind, but because of who she was as a person. She also fell in love. It happened slowly, like a sunrise. One day she realized that was no longer just her husband in name. He was her partner, her friend, her heart. "I need to tell you something," she said one evening as they sat together in the garden. Looked at her with those warm brown eyes. "What is it?" "When I left, I thought my life was over. I thought I was being sent away to die in shame, but instead," she paused, searching for words, "instead I found everything. I found a home. I found purpose. I found you." Took her hand gently. "And I found you. The person your mother threw away, the person she called worthless. She was wrong, she was so wrong." "I know that now," said. "You taught me that." "No," shook his head. "I just showed you the truth. You were never weak. You were never worthless. You were just surrounded by people who could not see your light, but I see it. I have always seen it." Leaned forward and kissed him. It was soft and gentle and full of all the things she could not say with words. That night she made a promise to herself. She would never again let anyone tell her she was nothing. She would never again bow her head in shame. She was daughter of, wife of Earth, and something new, something that had never existed before. And she was only just beginning. The years on Earth taught her the most important lesson of all. Humans were not weak. They were different. They had no psychic powers, but they had something else. They had the ability to adapt, to change, to grow. They looked at problems and found new solutions. They fell down and got back up. They refused to accept that anything was impossible. Called it the human spirit. And now, after 3 years of living among them, felt that spirit burning inside her own chest. She was no longer the frightened girl who had left. She was something new, something stronger. And soon, the galaxy would see what she had become. It started with a small trade dispute. A species called the Moran had been bullied by the Empire for centuries. They were a peaceful people, farmers and craftsmen who had no interest in war. But they demanded heavy taxes from them, and when they could not pay, soldiers took what they wanted by force. One day, a Moran merchant ship arrived at Earth, seeking help. They had heard rumors about a princess who had married a human. They had heard that she was different from her people. They came to beg for her help. Brought the merchant to their home. He was a small creature, barely 4 feet tall, with soft fur and large frightened eyes. His name was, and he trembled as he spoke. "Please," said his voice shaking, "they take everything from us, our crops, our children, our hope. We have nowhere else to turn. We heard that the human princess might listen." Looked at this small, scared creature, and she saw herself. She saw the girl who had stood before her mother's throne, trembling and afraid. She saw the girl who had been told she was worthless. "Tell me everything," she said. For hours spoke about the suffering of his people. The Moran had no army. They had no weapons. They had nothing to fight back with. The Empire treated them like slaves, and no one in the galaxy seemed to care. When he finished, looked at, they had a silent conversation with their eyes, the kind that only people who truly know each other can have. "We will help you," said. His eyes went wide. "You will, but how? They are too powerful. They will crush anyone who stands against them." "We will not fight them with weapons," said. "We will fight them with something they do not understand: unity." Over the next few months and traveled across the galaxy. They visited worlds that they had ignored or abused. They met with species that had been pushed aside, forgotten, treated as less than nothing. And everywhere they went, they brought the same message: you are not alone. The Moran joined them first. Then a warrior species called who had been defeated by the decades ago and forced to live in poverty. Then a race of traders who had been cheated out of their shipping routes. Then inventors who had been patents and recognition for their creations. One by one, the forgotten species of the galaxy began to gather. Used his diplomatic skills to negotiate agreements between groups that had never spoken before. Used her understanding of politics to predict her mother's moves and counter them. Together, they built something new, a coalition of the overlooked, the underestimated, the cast aside. They called it the Rising Alliance. At first, the Empire did not take them seriously. Queen laughed when she heard the reports. Her weak daughter playing at politics. The humans pretending to be important. It was a joke. It was beneath her notice. But the alliance grew stronger. The Moran farmers learned to protect their crops with new technology from the warriors trained soldiers from a dozen different species. The traders built new shipping routes that bypassed controlled space. Slowly, the economic power began to shift. 5 years after it had left, the Rising Alliance controlled 15 star systems. They had their own trade networks, their own defense fleet, their own council of leaders. And at the center of it all sat the princess no one wanted and the human everyone had underestimated. Word of their success spread throughout the galaxy. Species that had been afraid to speak out began to whisper about the alliance. Some even began to secretly support them. Queen finally began to pay attention. She summoned her eldest daughter, Myra, to the throne room. Myra was everything was not powerful, cruel, and completely loyal to her mother. "What do you make of this alliance?" the queen asked. Myra sneered. "A collection of weaklings led by a failure. They are nothing." They control 15 systems, the Queen said coldly. They have disrupted our trade routes. They have cost us billions in revenue. That is not nothing. Then let me crush them, Myra said eagerly. Give me a fleet, and I will destroy every world that has joined them. Queen considered this. It would be easy. The military was the strongest in the known galaxy. They could wipe out the Alliance in weeks. But something held her back. The other great powers were watching. If they attacked without clear reason, it could spark a larger war. And there was something else, something she did not want to admit. A small part of her was curious about what had become. Not yet, the Queen said finally. We will watch, we will wait. Let them think they are safe. When the time is right, we will remind them who rules this galaxy. But the time was never right. The Alliance kept growing. More species joined. More systems came under their protection. And at the heart of it all, worked tirelessly to build bridges between peoples who had never trusted each other before. How do you do it? A general asked her once. How do you make enemies become friends? Thought about the question carefully. I do not see them as enemies. I see them as people who have been hurt, people who are afraid. When you understand that, everything changes. That is very human thinking, the general said. Smiled, yes, it is. By the 10th year of the Alliance, they were no longer a joke. They were a power, not as strong as the Empire, but strong enough to defend themselves, strong enough to matter. And Queen, sitting on her crystal throne, began to feel something she had not felt in a very long time. Fear. She looked out at the stars and thought about the daughter she had thrown away, the weak child, the embarrassment, the nothing. How had nothing become something? How had weakness become strength? She did not understand. She could not understand. Because Queen had spent her entire life believing that power came from psychic ability, from military might, from fear and control. She had never learned what had learned on Earth. True power comes from people who believe in each other. It comes from hope. It comes from the willingness to see value in those the world has rejected. And that kind of power cannot be destroyed by any fleet or any army. It can only grow. In her office on the Alliance capital world, stood before a window and watched ships coming and going. Each ship carried people from different worlds, different species, different backgrounds, all of them working together for something greater than themselves. Came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. What are you thinking about? He asked. My mother admitted. I wonder if she knows what she created when she sent me away. She created nothing, said. You created this. You and everyone who believed that things could be different. Turned in his arms and looked up at him. I could not have done any of this without you. Yes, you could have, said. You just needed someone to remind you who you really are. She kissed him softly, then turned back to the window. Somewhere out there her mother was watching, waiting, planning. The storm was coming, could feel it. But she was not afraid, not anymore. Let it come. The warning came too late. Deep in the void between galaxies, something ancient stirred. It had no name that living creatures could speak. It had no form that minds could understand. The scientists called it the Hollow, a force of pure destruction that moved through space like a plague, consuming everything in its path. The first world to fall was a small colony on the edge of space. Within hours, every living thing on the planet was dead, not killed, erased, as if they had never existed at all. Queen sent her most powerful psychics to investigate. They never returned. She sent a battle fleet of 50 warships. They lasted 6 minutes. The Hollow moved toward the heart of the Empire like a slow, unstoppable tide. It could not be reasoned with. It could not be bribed. It could not be threatened. It simply destroyed. And the great Empire, for all its power, could do nothing to stop it. On the Alliance capital world, watched the reports with growing horror. Whatever her feelings about her mother and her people, there were still living beings. They were still people, and they were dying by the millions. "We have to help them," she said. The Alliance Council erupted in anger. "Help them?" shouted the general. "They enslaved my people for generations." "They stole everything from us," cried the Morin representative. "Let them burn," said the trade minister coldly. "They deserve it." Let them shout. She understood their anger. She shared it in some ways. They had caused so much pain, so much suffering. A part of her wanted to watch them fall. But that was not who she had become. "I understand your feelings," she said when the room finally quieted. "I share them. My own mother cast me out like garbage. My people told me I was worthless from the day I was born. I have every reason to hate them." She paused, looking around the room at the faces of her allies, her friends, her family. "But if we let them die, if we stand by and do nothing while innocent people are erased, then we are no better than they were. We built this alliance on the belief that every life has value. That belief cannot have exceptions, not even for those who hurt us." The room was silent. Stood up beside her. "My wife is right. The hollow will not stop its space. If it destroys the empire, it will come for us next. Our only chance is to stand together, all of us, even our enemies." The debate lasted for hours. In the end, the vote was close, but the Alliance agreed to offer help to the empire. Sent a message to her mother. The Queen did not respond for 3 days. During that time, 4 more worlds fell. Finally, a transmission came through, not on the official channels, but on a private frequency that only the royal family knew. Queen's face appeared on the screen. She looked old, tired, afraid. She said, her voice was rough as if she had been crying, I did not expect you to reach out. Your people are dying, Mother. I could not stay silent." "Why?" The Queen's eyes searched her daughter's face. "After everything I did to you, everything I said, why would you help us?" "Because it is the right thing to do." Queen stared at her for a long moment. Something flickered in her eyes, surprise, perhaps, or confusion. She had spent her life believing that power came from cruelty and strength. She did not understand kindness. She did not understand mercy. "What do you want in return?" the Queen asked finally. "Nothing. Nothing. We will help you because you need help. That is all. No conditions, no demands, just help." The Queen was silent for a very long time. "Very well," she said at last. "What do you propose?" Over the next weeks, the Alliance fleet traveled to space. They brought supplies, medical equipment, and soldiers to help evacuate the threatened worlds. They worked alongside ships, something that would have been unthinkable just months before. Coordinated everything from the Alliance flagship. She worked 20-hour days, managing evacuations, directing supplies, and keeping the fragile cooperation from falling apart. Was always beside her, handling the diplomatic challenges that arose when species with centuries of bad history were forced to work together. But nothing they did could slow the hollow. It reached thee on a cold morning. Watch from orbit as the darkness spread across the planet's surface. The great crystal cities that she remembered from her childhood went dark. Billions of voices cried out and then fell silent. The psychic shockwave hit every in the fleet. Myra, who had been commanding the defense forces, collapsed on her bridge. Half the soldiers fell unconscious. The rest were crippled by pain. The great psychic warriors of the Empire, the most powerful minds in the galaxy, were useless. The hollow did not just kill their bodies, it killed their minds. Their connection to there was a weakness, not a strength. But the Alliance soldiers kept fighting. The humans had no psychic link to lose. The Morin had never had mental powers. They felt no pain from the psychic shockwave. They held the line while the forces recovered. And slowly, something strange began to happen. The hollow seemed to hesitate. It had never encountered beings without psychic presence before. The Alliance soldiers were invisible to it in ways that were not. They could get close to it without being sensed. They could strike at it without warning. It was not enough to stop it, but it was enough to slow it down. On the Alliance flagship, worked with scientists from a dozen species to understand what was happening. They discovered that the hollow fed on psychic energy. That was why it targeted the first. They were the beacon in the galaxy. But beings without psychic power were like shadows to it, hard to see, hard to catch. "We can use this," said. "If we can get close enough, we might be able to hurt it." "It would be a suicide mission," the general said. "Whoever goes would never come back." "Then I will go," said a quiet voice. Everyone turned to see Queen standing in the doorway. She had escaped the just before it fell, rescued by Alliance soldiers who did not even know who she was. Now she stood before her former enemies, looking like a ghost of her former self. Mother said, "You cannot." "Let me speak." The Queen walked into the room. Her steps were unsteady, but her voice was firm. "I have spent my entire life believing that psychic power was everything, that it made us superior, that it made us worthy of ruling the galaxy. I was wrong." She looked at the Alliance commanders, the species she had oppressed and ignored for so long. "You came to help us when you had every reason to let us die. Your soldiers fought and died for our people. I do not deserve your mercy, but you gave it anyway." She turned to, "My daughter gave it, the daughter I threw away because I thought she was weak." Tears ran down the Queen's face. "I was the weak one. I was so afraid of being ordinary that I could not see the extraordinary person standing right in front of me. And now I want to make it right. Let me do this one thing. Let me fight the Hollow. Let me show my people and the galaxy that even the proudest queen can learn from her mistakes." Felt tears burning in her own eyes. "Mother." "Please," Queen whispered, "let me be brave just this once." The room was silent, then stepped forward. "You will not go alone," he said. "I will go with you." Grabbed his arm. "No, you cannot." "I can." He looked at her with those warm brown eyes that she loved so much. "This is what humans do. We walk into the darkness so others do not have to. It is our gift." "I cannot lose you." "You will never lose me." He touched her face gently. "No matter what happens, I will always be with you, right here." He placed his hand over her heart, pulled him close and held him tightly. She knew she could not stop him. She knew this was who he was, who he had always been. The man who saw value in the worthless. The man who walked toward danger instead of away from it. The human she loved. "Come back to me," she whispered. "I will try," he said. "I promise I will try." Hours later, she watched his ship fly toward the Hollow, carrying a weapon that the Alliance scientists had built. A psychic nullifier, a device that would make everything within its radius invisible to the Hollow. Queen's ship flew beside him. The darkness swallowed them both. And waited. For 3 days there was nothing, no signal, no sign, just silence from the heart of the Hollow. Did not eat. She did not sleep. She stood at the observation window of the flagship and stared into the darkness, waiting for something, anything, that would tell her was still alive. The Alliance Council begged her to rest. Her friends brought her food that went untouched. Even Myra, her eldest sister who had once looked at her with such contempt, came to stand beside her in silence. On the 3rd day, the Hollow began to change. At first, no one understood what was happening. The darkness that had been spreading across the stars began to slow. Then it stopped. Then, impossibly, it started to shrink. Scientists across the fleet scrambled to understand. The readings made no sense. The Hollow was pulling back into itself, collapsing like a dying star. "Something is happening inside it," the lead scientist reported. "The psychic nullifier, it is working. The Hollow cannot feed. It is starving." "But what about the people inside?" demanded. "What about in my mother?" The scientist hesitated. We do not know. The readings are unclear. I am sorry." The Hollow continued to collapse for 6 more hours. Then, in a flash of light that could be seen across 3 star systems, it vanished. Where it had been there was nothing, just empty space. And one small ship, drifting alone in the void, was on the first rescue vessel. She did not wait for safety checks or protocol. She flew to that ship and forced open the airlock with her own hands. Inside she found. He was unconscious, barely breathing, his face pale and his body covered in strange burns. But he was alive. Against all odds, against all reason, he was alive. She fell to her knees beside him and pulled him into her arms. "You promised," she whispered through her tears. "You promised you would come back." His eyes fluttered open. For a moment he seemed confused. Then he saw her face, and he smiled, that same warm smile that had changed her life all those years ago. "I keep my promises," he said weakly. Laughed and cried at the same time. She held him close and did not let go until the medical team forced her to step back so they could treat him. Queen was not as lucky. They found her in the other chamber of the ship. She had used her psychic powers to shield from the worst of the Hollow's final attack. She had given everything she had to protect the human she had once considered beneath her notice. She was still alive, but barely. Her mind had been shattered by the effort. She would never fully recover. When came to see her in the medical bay, the Queen was lying still, her eyes staring at nothing. But when she heard her daughter's voice, something flickered in those eyes. Recognition. Understanding. She whispered. The word came out broken, like something learned long ago and almost forgotten. "I am here, Mother." A single tear rolled down the Queen's silver cheek. "I am sorry, so sorry for everything." Took her mother's hand. It felt fragile and cold, like a dead leaf in autumn. "I know," she said. "I wasted so much time, threw away so much love, I was so blind." The Queen's voice cracked. "You were never weak. You were the strongest of all my children, and I was too foolish to see it." "Mother." "No, let me say this, please." Queen's grip tightened slightly on his hand. "I spent my whole life believing that power was everything, that it made me worthy, that it made me a queen, but real power, real strength, it comes from here." She lifted a trembling hand to touch his chest, right over her heart. "From love, from kindness, from the courage to be different." She fell silent for a moment, gathering her strength. "The human taught you that. And you taught the galaxy. You built something I could never build. Not with all my armies, not with all my psychic might. You built hope." Felt tears streaming down her face. All her life she had wanted her mother's approval. All her life she had dreamed of hearing these words. And now that they were here, she did not feel triumph or satisfaction. She only felt sadness. "I forgive you, Mother," she said. "I forgive all of it." Queen smiled. It was a real smile, perhaps the first real smile had ever seen on her mother's face. "Thank you," she whispered. "My daughter, my greatest gift." She closed her eyes and drifted into sleep. She would wake again in the days and weeks that followed. But she would never be the same. The fierce queen who had ruled an empire with an iron will was gone. In her place was a frail old woman who spent her days in a quiet room, looking out at the stars and thinking about all the things she wished she had done differently. The empire, meanwhile, was in ruins. There was gone. Their population had been reduced by half. Their military was scattered. They were no longer the great power they had once been. The Alliance Council met to discuss what should be done. Many voices called for harsh terms that had oppressed them for centuries. Now was the time for justice. Now was the time for revenge. But stood before them and spoke differently. "We did not build this alliance on revenge," she said. "We built it on hope, on the belief that beings from different worlds could work together, on the idea that the strong should help the weak, not crush them." She looked around the room at faces that had become so familiar over the years. The general, the Moran representatives, the traders, the scientists, all of them watching her with respect. They were our enemies, but they are also people, people who have lost everything. If we punish them now, we become what they were. We become the oppressors. Is that what we want? The room was quiet. Let us rebuild together, continued. All of us, an alliance alike, not as rulers and subjects but as equals. Let us show the galaxy that there is another way, a better way. Let us prove that even the deepest wounds can heal. The vote was unanimous. The new government was called the United Worlds. It included every species in the former alliance, plus what remained of the empire. Was asked to lead it, but she refused. I am not a queen, she said. I never wanted to be one. Choose someone else. Instead, she returned to Earth. The years that followed were peaceful. The United Worlds grew and prospered. Species that had once been enemies now worked side by side. Children from different planets played together, never knowing the hatred that their grandparents had felt. And on Earth, in a small house with a beautiful garden, and grew old together. One evening, they sat on their porch and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Do you ever regret it? Asked, leaving the alliance, walking away from power. Thought about the question. She thought about her mother, still alive but broken, living out her final years in a quiet home on one of the rebuilt colonies. She thought about her sisters, who had finally learned to respect her. She thought about all the beings across the galaxy who now lived in peace because of what she had built. No, she said, I have everything I ever wanted, a home, a purpose, you. Took her hand, and they watched the stars come out one by one. Somewhere up there, a galaxy was healing, wounds were closing, old hatreds were fading away. And it had all started with a queen's cruelty, a mother's regret, a daughter's courage, and a human who saw value where no one else would look. The story would be told for generations, how the weak became strong, how the forgotten became leaders, how love conquered fear. But for it was not a story, it was just her life, a life that had been broken and rebuilt, a life that proved something important. That weakness is not what you are born with, it is what you choose to be. And she had chosen to be strong.